Hi there, my name is Nicole Adams and I'm the owner and founder of Origin House of Fitness here in Fort Collins, Colorado. One of the things that really sets my studio apart from other fitness studios around the world is the fact that I incorporate trauma-informed care into my teaching methodology. I feel like trauma is just such a buzzword with these days, with everything that's going on in the world and even in our country. So I think it's really important to understand what trauma is. So in its simplest form, trauma is a deeply distressing or disturbing experience. And when we talk about psychological trauma, we talk about the damage to a person's psyche that is a result of that distressing or disturbing event or experience. And there are varying degrees and layers, if you will, of trauma. So somebody may have more of an isolated event where they're in a car accident or a loved one dies, or maybe someone experiences a miscarriage or even a really bad breakup. There's so many different kind of traumatic singular events, if you will, that can happen. And then we start to get into more complex events. So maybe someone was abused repeatedly as a child or in a relationship. And those events will start to kind of snowball and accumulate over time and can lead to really severe anxiety and PTSD. And PTSD is another word that I feel like is kind of a buzzword. I feel like when people hear the word PTSD, they think war veteran, right? Well, PTSD does not affect just war veterans. It affects really anyone who has had more of a series or complex series of events that have led to this traumatic response. So when we look at development, for instance, in a person, Erik Erikson came up with 8 stages of development, the very first one being trust versus mistrust. And the way he set up his stages of development is that they go from infancy until adulthood. So this is supposed to be occurring when we're infants. So in a case where someone is abused or abandoned or neglected as a child, they don't graduate that stage, if you will. So all of a sudden, if they are not able to trust and are stuck in this space of mistrust, we can start to see how that may create this underlying kind of behavioral issue that can really affect them on an everyday life. So speaking more specifically about PTSD, there are 4 kind of main symptoms, if you will. These are all kind of related. It'll all come back around, I promise. So one of the main symptoms can be reliving the event. So people can have nightmares, they can have flashbacks, they can also get stuck kind of in the present moment, almost kind of obsessing or rethinking about a certain event. People may also avoid situations that trigger them. So maybe a really noisy environment, there may be specific sounds or smells that kind of bring that person back to that experience. We also see a lot of negative feelings and beliefs around the person themselves, around other people, feelings of guilt and shame. And another really, really important one, really common one, is being in a state of fight or flight or kind of hyper arousal. So this means that, this person is constantly aware of potential danger. Where is the door? Where is, my environment? Who is around me? What's coming at me? Is something going to harm me? So we can really start to see when we look at some of these symptoms, how difficult it might be to kind of function on a day-to-day basis if people are dealing with these sensations and these thoughts and these emotions. It's paralyzing to a certain degree, and I'll get into my personal story eventually, maybe not in this video, but it is a very personal story for me as well. So very, very challenging to kind of live this way. So my story, in brief, I'll shoot another video more in depth about my story, but in short, I had a very traumatic childhood. I was abused as a child. Ultimately, I was abandoned by my biological mother, who put me up for adoption. So right there, we've got trust versus mistrust. I did not graduate that step. And a series, especially when I was young, at a very developmentally fragile age, experiencing a lot of trauma. So I do have PTSD, and these are all things that I definitely deal with on a day-to-day basis. So my story as it relates to fitness and opening my studio is that when I was in my early 20s, I was in a yoga class. It was a very, very, very mellow yoga class. Just a simple hatha class, no like power vinyasa flow, no weights, nothing too intense. And I'd been practicing yoga kind of pretty regularly for a few years. Well, during this class, I actually had a panic attack. I'd never had a panic attack before. I had no idea what was happening to me. I was hyperventilating, I was panicking, I was reliving trauma as kind of different auditory, visual, somatic experiences. And I ended up kind of hiding underneath a blanket in the corner of the room, just super, super terrified, embarrassed, ashamed. And unfortunately, my teacher's response was to turn off the lights at the end of the class and leave me there alone. And I can only imagine that this instructor had no idea how to deal with someone like me who was having a panic attack in his class. And because of that experience, I decided to pursue a degree in psychology and also in yoga. So I really wanted to understand what had happened from all angles. I wanted to understand my experience, my story, my childhood, my trauma, and how that had affected my development. But then I also wanted to understand what had happened to me in this kind of exercise class, because it's something that I had never experienced before. I had never heard anyone else having an experience like that. So I really made it my first initial mission to learn as much I could about all of these different things. So during this process, I did end up becoming certified to teach yoga. I have about, I don't even know, over 1,000 hours of training and certification in the fitness industry at this point. So I've been through a lot of different trainings, whether it be yoga, bar fitness, Pilates, spinning, all different types of fitness certifications and trainings. And not once during a single one of those trainings did any part of the training address trauma, what to do if someone was having a very normal, very human experience in a class. And I found that very shocking, very frustrating, and really surprising, because especially in this day and age, as more and more of our general population is becoming traumatized, I feel like it's imperative that we address this and that teachers understand how to support students who, I didn't plan on having a panic attack in class. I had no idea, but it happened. And it happened because when we start to move our bodies, we start to kind of uncover and unlock some of these things that maybe we've kind of tucked away, or maybe have been repressed, or maybe we haven't dealt with. When we start to breathe, when we start to really tune into our bodies, the sensation that's happening, the thought process, the thoughts that are associated with those different sensations and movements, we can start to see how it's all related. And that was certainly my experience. So what I'm doing here is offering trauma-informed care. I'm not going to tell my clients that specifically during a class, but that means is that I'm much more mindful of the possibility for someone to have a similar experience as I did in my class. And I'm prepared to handle a situation like that if it were to arise. So when we go back to some of those symptoms of PTSD, we talk about, people being in this constant kind of state of panic or fight or flight. The possibility that, sudden movements, that someone touching them, that loud noises could potentially be triggers. So the way I teach my classes is I don't blast the music. Yes, we use music because it's a motivational force. In a lot of my classes, we use the beat, we teach and we move to the beat. But I keep it at a level where it's not overpowering, it's not overwhelming, it's not intimidating, it's not threatening. Same thing with the lighting. If you walk into a room that's like, boo, super, super bright, that might not feel so great. It's also not super dark. I don't have any little kind of dark corners. And I don't touch people in my class unless I have established a relationship and a connection with them. And again, that goes back to that potential of triggering someone. And the way that I actually physically teach people is, first of all, I teach people how to breathe. We talk about breath in every single one of my classes. We talk about the importance of it. And we also talk about how the breath can really be used as a tool to calm down the nervous system. So people like myself who are in this constant state of panic, all it takes is a few deep breaths and coming back to that breath to really start to calm down the body. Now, the flip side of that is when you start to calm down the body and when you start to become a little bit more present, that's when some of that junk, if you will, can really start to bubble up. So the next step, the next piece is then, okay, how do we work with sensation in our bodies? As far as I know, no one's ever died from a bar class, for instance, and I'll crack some jokes here and there along the way just to keep things light. But what I do want people to understand is that we're all humans, we've all got our stories, we've all got our baggage, and it's quite possible, that someday, maybe not today, we're going to have a human experience, and we're probably not going to be, in the safety and privacy of our own homes or in our cars when that happens. There's a good possibility that we're going to be out and about in the world. So I want to create a safe space where people can show up on their mats with all of their baggage, with whatever's going on for them that day in that moment. So we breathe. We talk a lot about the breath. We also talk a lot about proper alignment and muscle engagement, because of course I want people to get the best workout possible. I want them to understand proper posture. I want them to understand what muscles that we're using, where we're trying to strengthen and stabilize the body. But I also want them to start to be aware of sensation in general in their bodies and the connection between sensation and thoughts. Most often our thoughts, our minds are going to give up long before our bodies can. So I encourage people to stay in a position, maybe just for a few extra counts. The other piece of that, though, that we need to be mindful of with this more trauma-informed care is that fine line between staying and pushing that boundary, but then pushing it to a point of self-destruction. And that is certainly my story, my habit, my tendency. So if I were to be in a class, where someone is like, go, 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 CrossFit is a great example. I love CrossFit. It's one of my favorite workouts of all time. I absolutely love it. But what I found is that I just really got into some really, really negative and bad self-destructive tendencies. They have these workouts called AMRAPs, where you're literally doing as many reps as possible in a certain amount of time. And I would walk into it and say, okay, if I start to lose my form, I'm gonna stop. Did I ever stop? No, absolutely not. Did my coach ever stop me? No, absolutely not. You've got 10 seconds left, how many more can you do? And so what I'm trying to do here is, again, find that balance. I'm pushing people, to find that edge physically, but also to understand the balance, the duality. The reality of the situation is our bodies are going to be different every single day. We might have a cold, we might have really bad allergies, which is why I'm a little nasally today. We might have an injury, maybe we're just having a shitty day, and that's totally okay. So I give people permission and I teach them how to make that decision for themselves. It's not my job to make someone's decision for them. I can come over and I'll correct people, maybe their chaturangas, maybe their push-ups, are a little dicey. There's only so much I can do. I'm not going to force that person or single them out to modify, but I'm going to give them the best cues that I possibly can so that they have a safe, effective, and efficient and sustainable workout. And I'm also going to give them permission to explore that boundary, that line within their own bodies for that specific day, for that specific class. So again, that is my teaching methodology here. That is what trauma-informed care means to me and how I've applied this based on my personal experience, my personal trauma, and my personal journey with having PTSD, and going through all of these tons and tons and hours of training and certifications, and of course just being in the industry and teaching for over a decade. It is a big miss in the industry currently. So that's how I teach. That's how I create a safe space for all of my clients, no matter who they are. Our whole mission here is making fitness accessible for everybody. So it doesn't matter if you're an Olympic athlete, if you're a weekend warrior, if you're injured, if you're pre or postnatal, all different types of bodies, right? And then I take that even further and I create a safe space to really invite the stories, the baggage, whatever the stuff is that are attached to those bodies to come here and get a workout in a place where they can feel safe. So not only are people getting an exceptional workout here, but they're also getting that educational piece. My hope is that everything that we do in this studio, people can then take outside of the doors and really impact them on a day-to-day life. So please check out Origin House of Fitness. There's tons more information on my story, my teething methodology, and what I'm up to here in Fort Collins, Colorado. My next process, if you will, is to create a training piece For fitness professionals is probably where I'm going to start, trauma-informed care, just so they can get that piece that I really feel like is a huge miss in different trainings and certifications. You know, there is a possibility to go out and become a yoga therapist or things like that, but those are all kind of separate individual trainings in addition to, say, becoming bar fitness certified or a certified yoga instructor. So I'm going to start offering that. An online version will be available eventually, and then I hope to take that to educators and really anyone who's working with populations of people that have a good chance, a good possibility of being traumatized. Because I think in this day and age, it's so important that we understand what that means, that we're mindful of that, so we really can create a safe, welcoming, and encouraging space for our clientele, our members, no matter what industry that we're working in. Thanks so much for taking the time to listen to my story. Please feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions. I'm always happy to be a resource, to connect with people. This is a really big passion of mine, and my hope is to really make an impact here, not only in Colorado, but across the country and world.